Think back to when a man with ink-stained hands and an unfinished play was somehow the most romantic figure in cinema, and half the audience walked out a little bit in love with a playwright who'd been dead for 400 years. Shakespeare in Love hit theaters in December 1998 and pulled it off. Joseph Fiennes played Will as a scruffy, broke, word-drunk disaster of a man who couldn't finish a sentence, let alone a play, and audiences adored him for it. Gwyneth Paltrow was Viola, a wealthy merchant's daughter who disguised herself as a man just to get on a stage, fell for the wrong person anyway, and was magnificent about the whole thing. Judi Dench showed up for 8 minutes as Queen Elizabeth I and left with an Oscar. Colin Firth played Lord Wessex with the kind of cold, entitled menace that made you want Shakespeare to win even more than you already did. Geoffrey Rush worried about money. Ben Affleck played the most famous actor of his generation, which required very little adjustment. Directed by John Madden and written by Mark Norman and Tom Stoppard, the film cost $25 million, grossed $289 million worldwide, and walked away with 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, one of the most disputed wins in Oscar history, and we'll get into exactly why. Behind all of it, The Candlelight, The Doublets, The Farewell at the Water's Edge, was a production that had been killed, resurrected, and hijacked by people none of whom were the director. Today we're counting down 15 wild facts you didn't know about Shakespeare in Love. The star who flew to London got Daniel Day-Lewis to say yes and then vanished overnight. The Oscar that spent 25 years hiding behind a door. The ending shot with a fake beard. And the reason the greatest screenplay of the decade exists at all. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe. We go deep on the films and TV shows that shaped us. Let's get into the countdown with number 15. Number 15, the movie about borrowed genius, had borrowed ideas. You know the film's central joke. Shakespeare steals his best ideas from the world around him, overheard conversations, doomed romances, borrowed moments, clever, playful. It earned Tom Stoppard an Oscar, and it also, according to at least 2 other writers, described exactly what Stoppard and Mark Norman had done to them. A 1941 British novel called No Bed for Bacon features Shakespeare suffering from writer's block, a noblewoman named Viola who disguises herself as a boy to join his acting company, and a love affair between them. The film's own Wikipedia page describes it as an inspiration. Critics noted the similarities were substantial. Amazon reviewers were less diplomatic. One wrote that the film plagiarized it quite well but still fell short of the original. But that wasn't the lawsuit. The lawsuit came from mystery writer Faye Kellerman, who filed a copyright infringement claim against Miramax, Tom Stoppard, and Mark Norman, alleging they'd lifted the plot from her 1989 novel, The Quality of Mercy. In Kellerman's novel, a young Shakespeare romances a woman who disguises herself as a man. Miramax called the claim absurd and noted the timing, filed 6 days before the Academy Awards, suggested a publicity stunt. Both cases settled out of court. The film that asks whether Shakespeare really wrote his own work did not, according to at least 2 other writers, write its own work. There's a literary term for that kind of irony. Shakespeare probably had one. Number 14. Shakespeare in Love started with a college kid. The Best Picture winner of 1999 started with a phone call from a college kid. Mark Norman's son Zachary called home from Boston University in the late 1980s and told his dad, "Shakespeare is starting out in the Elizabethan theater business." Norman thought about it for 2 years, eventually cracking the concept with a fictional love affair as the engine. He sold the script to Universal. Universal hired Tom Stoppard to rewrite it. The project stalled, was resurrected, got hijacked by Harvey Weinstein, nearly destroyed by Julia Roberts, and finally reached theaters in December 1998. It grossed $289 million. It won 7 Academy Awards. Harrison Ford was in the building to hand over Best Picture. Nearly 50 million people watched Gwyneth Paltrow cry. The whole call probably lasted 5 minutes. Consider what the film is actually about. A young man in debt, running out of time, who finds the spark he needs in an unexpected moment with someone he loves. The chaos becomes the raw material. The ordinary moment becomes the extraordinary work. Mark Norman's son called from his dorm with a half-formed pitch, and his father turned it into a Best Picture winner. Number 13, the greatest screenplay of 1998, was funded by a rumor. Universal had Mark Norman's script and wanted Tom Stoppard to rewrite it. Stoppard was arguably the greatest playwright in the English language. The man who wrote Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, who'd spent his career working in Shakespeare's shadow and making it look easy. He was the obvious choice. He asked for $1 million. Universal said no. Then word leaked. Producer Edward Zwick is careful to note that leaked is doing real work in that sentence, that Julia Roberts might be interested in the lead. Roberts hadn't read the script. There's no evidence she'd expressed actual interest. But the mere possibility of the woman from Pretty Woman in a corseted gown was apparently worth exactly $1 million to a major studio because Universal immediately reversed course and paid Stoppard his fee. Roberts would later enter the project, spend months at the center of it, and exit without filming a single day. Stoppard stayed. He rewrote the script into something completely different, funnier, denser, layered with jokes that work on two time periods simultaneously. He won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Every Elizabethan joke that doubles as a Hollywood joke, every line that sounds like Shakespeare without being Shakespeare, all of it exists because a studio panicked about losing a star they didn't actually have yet. The greatest screenplay of 1998, funded by a woman who was never in the movie. Number 12, the $6 million collapse that created Shakespeare in Love. The version of this film starring Julia Roberts lasted about 6 weeks and cost Universal $6 million. Here's what happened in between. Roberts arrived in London as the biggest star on the planet, and the production arranged for her to meet every leading man in England. According to Edward Zwick's memoir, she had one specific obsession, Daniel Day-Lewis. She sent him 24 roses with a note asking him to be her Romeo. He called back. He said yes. Then he backed out. He'd already committed to Jim Sheridan's In the Name of the Father and kept that promise. Roberts tested with nearly every actor in England. Hugh Grant, Sean Bean, Colin Firth. Ralph Fiennes came in and did his best. Her verdict when he'd left the room, not funny enough. The reads kept failing. The problem, Zwick concluded, was that Roberts hadn't been working on the accent, and until an accent becomes second nature, it dims everything behind it. Then she tested with a lesser-known actor named Paul McGann. Zwick hoped this might finally be it. The next morning, when Zwick called her room, he was told she'd checked out. Her manager later confirmed she'd left for the U.S. Universal shut the production down. They'd spent $6 million. The Globe Theater set they'd already built was dismantled. And without all of that, the collapse, the wasted money, the vanishing star, Miramax never acquires the rights. Gwyneth Paltrow never gets the call, and the film you know doesn't exist. Number 11. Russell Crowe lost Shakespeare and never let it go. When Miramax was casting, Harvey Weinstein wanted the Shakespeare role to anchor a star. Russell Crowe was offered the part. He turned it down rather than sign Weinstein's 5-picture deal. 2 years later, Crowe made Gladiator. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor. He would already have had one. Edward Zwick writes in his memoir that to this day, whenever he runs into Crowe, Crowe berates him for it. Not angrily, persistently. The most celebrated actor of his generation has never fully made peace with being left out of a period romantic comedy about an Elizabethan playwright who couldn't finish a play. It's worth sitting with what Crowe was actually being offered. Not just a role, the role that would have made him an Oscar contender in 1999, 2 years before Gladiator did it. The film that turned a relatively unknown English theater actor into one of People magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People would presumably have done something similar for the man who went on to play Maximus. Instead, Crowe walked away from it and still hasn't forgiven anyone involved for letting him. Number 10. Shakespeare in Love broke a Hollywood friendship. Gwyneth Paltrow and Winona Ryder weren't just friends in the late 1990s. They were New York roommates going on double dates with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, Paltrow with Affleck, Ryder with Damon, when all four were among the most photographed people in Hollywood. Matching cowboy hats were worn at some point, that kind of friendship group. According to Amy Odell's 2025 biography Gwyneth, the Shakespeare in Love script arrived in Ryder's apartment. Paltrow saw it, pursued the role, and got it. Ryder found out. Paltrow has always called this an urban myth. She says she received the script through her agent. A Weinstein quote in the same biography claims Paltrow actually recommended Ryder for the part. Every version contradicts every other version. Nobody's story matches. What we know, Ryder didn't get the part, Paltrow did. The friendship ended. Ryder has never publicly addressed it. Meanwhile, Affleck took a supporting role partly to stay near Paltrow on set, where the two were reportedly caught in an awkward situation in her dressing room mid-production. The runner who walked in was waved off with a curt "not now." The most glamorous social unit in 1990s, Hollywood fell apart over a script on a coffee table, and the two people who stayed together on set didn't stay together either. What are the odds? Number 9. The misread script that became Gwyneth's greatest role. And the man she fell in love with on that set almost wasn't in the film at all. When the script first arrived, Paltrow was mid-breakup from Brad Pitt and refused to open the envelope. Her agent told her it was more of a guy's part, which, given the lead character spends half the film dressed as a man, was technically accurate and completely wrong. Paltrow set it aside. Months later, a producer tracked her down and she finally read it. She couldn't put it down, she later told Variety. She tested with Joseph Fiennes. The chemistry was immediate. Then Weinstein tried to blow it up. Good Will Hunting had opened in December 1997 and made Ben Affleck a household name by the time Shakespeare in Love was filming. Weinstein wanted Affleck to play Shakespeare instead of Fiennes at the last minute during production. Paltrow blocked it personally. She told Weinstein he had to cast an English person. She'd already tested with Fiennes and knew what they had, and she wasn't going to let a producer's celebrity math dismantle it. Weinstein conceded. Affleck joined the cast as Ned Allen, the most celebrated actor of his era, a real historical figure whom Affleck himself described as the Tom Cruise of his day. A breakup, a misread script, a producer who wanted to swap the lead 3 weeks into filming. The greatest role of Paltrow's career almost didn't make it past the envelope. Number 8. Joseph Fiennes refused Weinstein's golden cage. Fiennes got the call in a small studio apartment. He screamed. He made People magazine's Sexiest Men Alive. He starred in 2 award season films back-to-back, Shakespeare in Love and Elizabeth, and had the kind of momentum that happens maybe twice a decade. Miramax offered him a guaranteed career. 5 pictures, A-list status, Weinstein's full machinery behind him. He turned it down. Weinstein summoned Fiennes to a hotel room to lay out the terms. According to Fiennes, speaking to The Guardian in 2023, the way Weinstein explained it made clear he would be personally in charge of Fiennes' career, and that if Fiennes refused, he wouldn't work in Hollywood again. Fiennes said he sat there feeling present and strong, and told Weinstein he wasn't interested. He went back to theater. Weinstein made clear there'd be no Miramax support. Fiennes said he was out of the family and that he was fine with that. Weinstein was eventually convicted on multiple criminal charges across 2 states and is currently in prison. Fiennes spent the intervening years in theater and later The Handmaid's Tale, not a bad trade. Number 7. Judi Dench got the Oscar and the theater. Of all the improbable things that happened around this film, this one might be the most purely absurd. Judi Dench appears in Shakespeare in Love 3 times. Total screen time, 8 minutes. She won Best Supporting Actress. At the podium, she said she felt that for 8 minutes on screen, she should only get a little bit of the award. For context, Beatrice Straight won the same award in 1977 for 5 minutes and 40 seconds in Network. Dench is second on that all-time list. 8 minutes has never been worth more. And in the same year, Cate Blanchett played Queen Elizabeth I for an entire film, Elizabeth, directed by Shekhar Kapoor, and was nominated for Best Actress. She lost to Paltrow. Dench played the same queen for 8 minutes and won Supporting Actress. 2 actresses, 1 historical figure, 1 awards night. One of them had the whole film. The other had 8 minutes and the trophy. Here's the part nobody mentions. Dench was so taken with the full-scale Rose Theatre replica built for the film that Miramax gave it to her when production ended, the entire set. Variety reported in early 1999 that she was looking for land and a financial backer to restore it as a working theater. That report is from 1999. There are no confirmed reports of the theater opening since. Judi Dench was paid in a building. Somewhere in England, that building still exists. Nobody is quite sure what to do with it. Number 6. Shakespeare in Love's most romantic moment had a fake beard. After filming Wrapped, Weinstein had a note. He'd decided they'd made a romantic comedy that didn't end like one. He wanted the lovers together. Madden and Paltrow had to explain that Shakespeare couldn't end up with Viola. He had a wife in Stratford, had done since he was 18, Anne Hathaway, an entirely different person. She'd been back in Stratford the whole time the film was happening, and she's actually in the film. referenced in passing in one of the script's driest jokes. Weinstein accepted the historical fact. What he wouldn't accept was an ending without hope. As a compromise, Madden reshot a more generous farewell, the version in the film where Will and Viola say goodbye at the water's edge, knowing it's the last time. The tide comes in, the music swells, the audience cried. It works. And Weinstein was right to push for it. The catch: Fiennes had already shaved his beard for another job. He confirmed in Variety's 20th anniversary piece that he wore a prosthetic beard for the scene, glued over his clean-shaved jaw in full costume, delivering the farewell that made a generation feel things about William Shakespeare. The most romantic moment in the film is held together with spirit gum, which, if you think about it, is entirely in keeping with how everything else about this production worked. Number 5. Shakespeare in Love wasn't history, it was Hollywood. Let's be honest about what Shakespeare in Love is. Philip Henslowe owes money to people who will hurt him if the picture doesn't come in. He has a writer under contract who hasn't delivered a word. He promises investors a finished product that doesn't exist. He books the premiere before the script is done, and when everything falls apart, his answer is always the same. It'll work out. It's a mystery. That's not Elizabethan theater. That's every Hollywood production meeting ever held. Stoppard built the whole film as a satire of the film business, dressed it in doublets, and waited. Shakespeare visits a therapist, more than 2.5 centuries before Freud existed. The audition scene is a modern casting session in period costume. Actors file in, deliver 30 seconds, get dismissed while the writer stares at the ceiling. Colin Firth's villain owns Virginia tobacco plantations, a colony that won't be founded for another 14 years. There's a Visit Stratford-upon-Avon souvenir mug on Will's desk in 1593. Stoppard wasn't making historical errors. He was making jokes aimed directly at the industry that would be handing out the awards. After the film won Best Picture, a UC Berkeley history professor named Thomas Barnes gave a public lecture called The Use and Abuse of History in Shakespeare in Love. His verdict: the film portrays the 20th century, not the 16th. He was completely right. What he didn't say, what nobody said at the time, was that this was the point. The Academy gave Best Picture to a film that was quietly laughing at the Academy. Stoppard collected his Oscar and said nothing to correct the record. Number 4, Edward Zwick, spent 7 years and got pushed aside. Edward Zwick found out that Harvey Weinstein had acquired his project by reading it in the trades one morning over coffee. Nobody had called him. He'd spent 7 years on it, developing the concept, hiring Stoppard, flying to London for Julia Roberts, and learned it had been taken the way you'd learn about a weather event. He writes that when he confronted Weinstein, Weinstein made clear Zwick had no role in the new version of his own project. What followed was years of legal wrangling and what Zwick describes as direct intimidation, including Weinstein calling at midnight while Zwick's father was gravely ill in a Chicago hospital. They eventually settled. Weinstein reportedly said he couldn't help himself, that he did bad things, then delivered on none of his promises. Zwick got a producer credit and a spot on stage at the Oscars. When the moment came, Weinstein pushed past him to take the microphone. Zwick stood there with a frozen smile, briefly considered shoving Weinstein into the orchestra pit, and chose not to. He stood at the back and watched. His only public acknowledgement across the entire life of the film came from Stoppard at the Golden Globes. Stoppard's opening words at the podium: "Sorry, Harvey, but I first want to thank Ed Zwick." 2 sentences. In a room where Weinstein was sitting, Zwick writes that he knows exactly how petty it is that this pleased him as much as it did. It was everything he got for 7 years. Number 3, the Oscar she couldn't look at for 25 years. Gwyneth Paltrow was 26 years old when she stood at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in a pink Ralph Lauren gown and cried through an acceptance speech that 46 million people watched live. The British press savaged her for it. Parodies ran for weeks. She became the punchline for a kind of cultural condescension that had decided public emotion was embarrassing. What almost nobody knew: her father, director Bruce Paltrow, was seriously ill. He died in 2002. She was 26, holding something enormous, and her father was sick. She said in 2023 that winning put her into an identity crisis. If you win the biggest prize, where do you go next? The Oscar went into storage almost immediately. In 2005, she described keeping it tucked away at the back of a bedroom bookshelf because it weirds her out. By 2023, it had migrated behind a door somewhere she didn't have to see it. She only recently moved it onto an actual shelf, 25 years after she won it. As of January 2026, she said her husband had the film on recently in another room. She walked in and asked him to change it. The identity crisis the win triggered, the feeling of hitting the highest point at 26 and having nowhere obvious to go, sent her looking for something she could actually control. She found it in a wellness newsletter she started in 2008. Goop is now valued at over $250 million. The brand built on that night's wreckage is worth 10 times what the film cost to make. The people who laughed at the speech were doing her a favor and had absolutely no idea. Number 2, Shakespeare in Love invented the Oscar campaign that corrupted it. Before Shakespeare in Love, an Oscar campaign was a screening, some ads, and hope. Weinstein decided that wasn't enough. Miramax spent somewhere between $5 million and estimates reaching $25 million on what became the template for every campaign since. They hired an in-house awards publicist, a role that barely existed before this. Producer Donna Gigliotti personally wrote invitations to Academy members by the 100. VHS screeners went to every eligible voter. They held parties that violated a 1997 Academy rule against such events. And a whisper campaign spread the suggestion that Saving Private Ryan's second half wasn't as strong as everyone assumed. Spielberg heard about it and told his DreamWorks team not to get down in the mud with Harvey. He took the high road. He lost Best Picture. When Harrison Ford opened the envelope, the room went quiet. Gasps. A few boos. Spielberg winning Best Director while Shakespeare took Best Picture was the first time those two prizes had gone to different films since 1989. In 2015, a Hollywood Reporter poll asked the same Academy voters to revote the category. They chose Saving Private Ryan by a wide margin, and when Weinstein's arrest made every front page in 2017, the photograph that ran everywhere, the one that became the image of his fall, was taken at the Shakespeare in Love Oscar ceremony. On stage, accepting, at the peak of everything he'd built. Director John Madden said in 2019 he felt uneasy when that photo became the defining image. "Does that take the movie away from us?" he asked. It doesn't, but it complicates it in a way that won't resolve. The campaign that invented modern award season became the symbol of what was wrong with it. The man who won became the argument against himself. Number 1, the last line hit a second masterpiece. In the final scene of Shakespeare in Love, Will sits down at his desk and begins writing a new play. He speaks in voiceover. "My story starts at sea, a perilous voyage to an unknown land, a shipwreck. And then, for she will be my heroine for all time, and her name will be Viola." He writes her name on the page. The film ends, and the heroine of Twelfth Night, the woman at the center of what many scholars consider Shakespeare's most perfectly constructed comedy, is named Viola. She survives a shipwreck on an unknown shore. She disguises herself as a man. She loves someone she cannot have. She endures the separation, and the story eventually finds a way through. The film's final image is Shakespeare naming his next heroine after the woman he just lost. You've spent 2 hours watching a movie that says, this woman, this love affair, this impossible situation. This is where Romeo and Juliet came from. What the film withholds until the very last moment is that she gave him something else too. Twelfth Night. The comedy where a woman named Viola washes ashore after a shipwreck, dresses as a man, loves someone she can't have, and endures. Written, the film implies, so that she could have an ending in fiction that she couldn't have in life. Shakespeare in Love is a film about a love story that produced 2 plays. The first one is told in full. The second one is left to the last possible moment. A name written on a blank page, the music rising, and if you know your Shakespeare, the entire film suddenly means something more than it just did. Stoppard put it in plain sight and never once pointed at it. He died on November the 29th, 2025, at 88. That is the cleverest thing any screenwriter has done in the last 50 years. He won the Oscar for it. Most people still don't know it's there. And there you have it. 15 facts about Shakespeare in Love.